What follows is an interview with Mackenney. Mack is what you would call a logistics expert, but his specialty is extreme environments. His best-known client is Sir Ranulph Fiennes, the author and undoubtedly the world's greatest living explorer. I began my questions talking about an expedition, series of expeditions and film TV series that were broadcast in 2012-13. It involved Shell Oil, they sponsored it, Discovery Channel broadcast it, and I began talking about the Discovery hype that I hate so much, that over-dramatization of events in a documentary film that just, I think, debases the audience by treating them as if they're idiots. It wasn't a bad TV show, but was the environment as threatening and as dangerous as the narrator suggested that it was?
Oh, the hype. Oh God, yeah.
So you
yeah,
guys,
there was nothing really dramatic happened.
No, so you guys would say would be in an environment, and if they don't get to the river in time, they're all gonna die. And I'm thinking,
This is pretty serious.
no, they're not going to die because they'll, and then the next episode or even later in this, and if they don't get in, they're all going to die. And then you had that windstorm.
Oh, that was for real. That was for real.
And then I thought, and what the commentator said was, "Here's the windstorm, and if they don't get in the cover soon, they're all going to die." And I thought, yeah, they're in trouble.
Yeah.
Now, they're in trouble.
Yeah.
Now I'm worried for them.
Because I was a bit concerned with the desert one, because we were supposed to go and meet a lot more people, but because it's right out on the west of China, it's one of their autonomous regions.
Yeah.
So basically, there's three areas of China that they've nicked off other people. You've got Inner Mongolia, so that's all of it above the Great Wall of China. So that used to belong to Mongolia. You've obviously got Tibet, and you've got this Uyghur region right out on the western side. So most of them look more like Afghan type people. They're Muslims. They're not the Han Chinese, Buddhist-y types or whatever religion they have in mainland China. And so we had 2 government minders to watch everything we did. And we were supposed to see a lot more people. And they said, "Oh no, that's an Uyghur. Can't talk to them because they might say something about the oppression of these people by the Chinese government."
Yes.
And so really, it was getting quite boring. So I thought, flip me, well, I'd gone out and recce'd it, and we're going to do this, and this, and this. And they go, "No, can't do that, can't do that, can't do that." So apart from the beginning bit where everyone got stuck, that's because the silly donuts wouldn't let their tyres down, and then 10 minutes later pump them back up again. We just sat there for hours. So actually the sandstorm at night was an absolute blessing, because otherwise it would have... Oh, yeah. I was praying something would happen. I didn't know it was going to happen at 3 o'clock in the morning when everyone's kind of sound asleep.
Yeah.
But, so that was good.
That was good. And I thought, that was the only time I thought, yeah, this is a bit tough. That's not nice. That's, and I understood that there was a danger involved, and I appreciated it. But so many of the other we're going to die moments, they weren't we're going to die moments at all.
Well,
and
the thing is, though, you are actually in an environment, particularly Siberia, where if you'd got your planning wrong and you hadn't got the right kit and you'd chosen the wrong vehicles and you didn't have the right local support, dying would have been very realistic, very quickly.
No, I appreciate that.
Would have made better television, probably.
Yes, I appreciate that, but I just had this repeated, this kind of, they're all going to die, and I was thinking, no, they're not.
Yeah.
Sometimes it was, I mean, imagine -60, driving in -60, and then getting out of the car and having to live and do other things in -60.
Yeah.
There's genuine risk involved.
Oh, yeah. Frostbite is measured in minutes. Absolute minutes. Oh, yeah, minutes. Yeah. Now, they were interviewing, I think it might have been on one of the YouTube clips or something, but they were interviewing Mikasalo.
Yes.
And it wasn't -60, it was only about -40 or so. And he'd been outside for 3 or 4 minutes, and he was going, crikey, my nose, I can't feel my nose anymore. And he was doing this, and then they got the medic on him and straight in. And he'd only been in for a while. Well, bearing in mind, the Royal Marines stopped training at -30 because it's too dangerous for them to train at any colder temperature, because the risk of a cold weather injury goes up exponentially. Yeah, massive risk above -30. And so, of course, we're operating at -40, 50 and -60. So this is way outside. You know, not you wouldn't call them Royal Marine Special Forces, but they're pretty damn close to Special Forces in what they can do and who the people that they are and what, you know, the training they've had. And so we're way beyond that, you know.
And
so
you did the logistics for the series. And you did the risk assessment as well. You did everything.
The brief from the ad agency that dreamt it up. So basically, you've got an ad agency. They dreamt it up. They said to Discovery, if we make this, are you going to put it on air? They said yes. So they went round their clients. Shell said, right, we'll pay for it, and we'll say it's about our engine oil. They then found a production company to film it, and there's only two really in the UK. It's either Top Gear, but that's all they do is Top Gear, or North One Television, who do Fifth Gear. So they were the only other motoring choice to come in and film it. So right, well, who's going to kind of make it happen? And that's when we got brought into the mix. So we had the money, we had the broadcaster, and we had the people to film it. But the brief from the ad agency who dreamt it up was hottest, coldest, toughest, Russia, China, India. That was it. Sort out everything. Absolutely everything. Vehicles, kit.
Which of those three, the hot, the cold, and the?
Well, it should have been the highest, but that got canned.
That got canned because you couldn't.
Because we couldn't get there because of Tibet and all the rest of it. So we called it the toughest, the jungle one.
The jungle one, yes.
Yeah,
which was the most difficult to plan, and which was the most risky for everybody involved?
Oh, Siberia.
Cold, because of the cold.
Just because we as humans, I think they say we're evolved from the plains of Ethiopia or something. You know, genetically we're designed to cope with heat. You know, and more people have experienced extreme heat when they've been on their holidays, and basically keep out the sun and just keep hydrated. You can kind of, it's a safer environment. We are not designed to operate at minus 60. We're not designed to really operate at minus 10. And so everything, you know, genetically, the makeup of our, you know, within cellular level,
yes,
we're designed to expel heat very well. You know, we sweat well and all the rest of it.
Right.
We don't have the body fat, we don't have the hair, we don't even have the little capillaries to pump blood right down to the very extremities. Yeah, now Inuits have evolved slightly differently. Apparently, at the end of each of their little blood vessels, they have an extra one of these capillaries.
Really?
Oh yeah. So they do get more blood flow to the extremities. Now us as sort of lowland Western types, more designed for the heat. No, we're not designed for it. So you've got to think of absolutely everything to ensure that this body that's not designed to be there can cope. So yeah.
And of the three, in terms of keeping the vehicles running, which was the most challenging to, you know, mechanically?
Probably the cold. Probably the cold again. Yeah, because once those engines were on, you cannot switch them off. You have to keep them running 24/7.
Okay.
And even to the point where we camped overnight with the reindeer herders, and we were, you know, up on the mountain plateau. It did get down to minus 60. You know, most of the crew are in what basically looked like a scout tent. It wasn't double walled. It was just a thin layer of canvas, like a typical army tent with a wood burning stove in the middle of it. But of course, unless you kept that thing stoked continuously, any heat that was in there soon evaporated and disappeared through the walls. So yes, we had the engines running, but of course there's the risk of a carbon monoxide poisoning, where you've got 7 vehicles, you know, 5 petrol and 2 diesel pumping out fumes, and if the wind changed direction, it sort of blowed right across the tent.
Towards the tent.
So of course it's all carbon monoxide detectors, smoke detectors, and the rest of it.
Did you manage to think of that beforehand?
Yeah.
You did?
Yeah, so we had all the detectors. But the other thing was, yes, the engine is running. That's all working nice and well. But what about the gearbox? There's some sort of heat permeating through the engine bay that's kind of getting there.
Yes.
But front diff, that'll probably remain relatively warm. Rear diff, well, that's out on its own. That's not going to get any heat. You know, nothing from the engine is going to reach that.
Nothing.
So the most we left it was 2 hours, absolute maximum, before we up and down and up and down and up and down. Got in the car. Me and Paul slept in the cars. He slept in his what we called it, the film car, where the film crew were, and I slept in the other car with the stars were, the star car. So yeah, so we kind of just laid out on the front seats, and then a little buzzer would go, right, that's it, up and down and up and down and up and down.
Wow.
To stop the fluids, you know, solidifying.
Solidifying.
Yeah. So
it wouldn't have been an idea to have built a small fire underneath the rear differentials.
the Russians do, yeah. When things go wrong, but of course, if you've then got a fire, you've got to stoke the fire.
Mm-hmm.
The fire, obviously, you put a fire
near a
by
fuel
a rear
tank.
near a fuel tank, and there's rubber hoses, and
Yeah.
But that are the lengths that they go to, if it all goes wrong.
Right.
Yeah, and they're out in for prolonged periods, and they
Right.
can't move it. That's the only way to do it. And light fires under the engine, light fires under the gearbox, under the diffs. You just got to get. And the other thing is the shocks, absolutely solid. So you have to keep them.
Of course.
You've got to keep them warm. So we had sort of like almost like a sleeping mat material, but with a sticky backing to it. So that was wrapped around all the shocks. So picking the right shocks that we knew that could cope was very important. But what some of the guys who are out there for long periods and operating and keeping the vehicle stationary for long periods, like if they're parked outside and they go to bed, they don't want to be moving the car every 2 hours every single night for sort of 4 months of the year. So they'll have electrical heaters wrapped around all the shocks to keep them warm.
Batteries?
They're all. You have to go for like a gel battery.
Yeah.
Obviously 2 batteries, because anything like this that's doing ancillary work.
Yeah, it's gonna. Yeah. And
you don't want to. You cannot afford for that engine to stop at all. So fuel quality is as ropey as anything out there.
Okay.
It's an Arctic diesel, so it's already good down to -50.
Okay.
And it won't, whereas ours will start waxing up at -15 or something. So yeah, -50. But it's basically just like paraffin. It's of horrible quality. So, and also where you're getting it is a very low standard. So you literally could pick pebbles out of the fuel tank. There's all sorts of muck.
Wow.
Coming out of there, big lumps of rust, big lumps of paint, and literally I have pulled small pebbles out of, because we pre-filter everything before it goes into the tank. So it's things like that you've got to think of everything, because if that engine packed up, and then if you were kind of foolish enough to rely 100% on that keeping you alive, and you didn't have -60 jackets, -60 sleeping bags, tents, stoves, fuel, water, etc., you're measuring your life expectancy in hours, not even days. So there's a lot to think about.
There must be a process that goes through your mind when you're saying, okay, this is the expedition that I'm setting up, and there are certain risks and things involved. There must be a process you use.
Well, there's I don't know where I first learnt the sort of the priorities. It was probably in the military, and that was shelter, water, food. But there are sort of others. There's accident as well.
Okay.
And so what I've basically coined is I call it the rule of 3.
Uh-huh.
And you're dealing with 3 minutes, 3 hours, 3 days, and 3 weeks. Okay?
Okay.
So your life expectancy, if you got it wrong and you're barreling across the Mackenney or something like that, and you hit a whopping pothole and you flip your vehicle and impale your head, and there's blood pouring out of every orifice, your life expectancy is 3 minutes. Yeah. If you are in an extreme environment, and we tend to be talking extreme cold, but it doesn't have to be that cold. You throw in a bit of wind chill, and you could be talking Western Europe, Scotland, and you are in the wrong place with the wrong kit, i.e. shelter for your body. And I don't just mean tent shelter, I mean clothing shelter.
Right.
Your life expectancy could be 3 hours. So 3 minutes if you have an accident, 3 hours if you haven't got the right shelter. And your next priorities are water. The average person in average conditions will survive three days without water. Obviously, if you're in the extreme heat of Africa,
then it's
the desert, and you're working hard,
yes.
You can dramatically cut that. If you're in a much more mild climate and it's quite moist and you're not sweating too much, you might be able to extend that to 4, maybe 5 days. But you're going to be,
you're going
to be a bad bit. You're not going to be thinking straight, so you're not going to be able to move very well. But yeah, average is 3 days.
Okay.
And then finally, your priority is food. The average person can survive 3 weeks without food. So 3 minutes, 3 hours, 3 days, 3 weeks. So that's kind of, so everything I think of, I have to base it on what are my priorities. So the least of my worries ever on any trip is how much, my camping equipment, my stove, my food supply, anything. That's kind of way.
Because that's the 3-month category. Is
well,
that
3 week.
I mean, the 3 week.
Yeah,
category.
so that's way down my list of priorities. Okay. Water's a pretty serious one.
Yeah.
Shelter gets a lot more serious, because if you get that wrong, life expectancy is over pretty quickly. But the priority is, do not stuff it up. Do not end up in a situation whereby you've had an accident. And so then that comes down to planning. So things like, am I and my team capable of operating in this environment? You know, are we going to be able to negotiate this road, this track, this river without, you know, it all going horribly wrong? Do we have the right training, the right skills, the right people to make it happen? Have I chosen the right vehicle? And once I've chosen the right vehicle, have I prepared it properly? Have I decided that I'm going to put, 15 jerry cans on the roof? I'm going to put roof tent, 2 spare wheels up there, high lift jacked, and all of a sudden the whole thing is so top heavy that it won't take too much to flip it upside down. And so you have to kind of build in all of those factors to ensure that you don't have an accident. Do I take nice comfy chairs and a table? Or do I take an axle stand and a big solid secure piece of wood to support it? So when I am crawling underneath, tinkering with something, changing the oil, the whole thing doesn't collapse on me. Yeah. Do I have a first aid kit? Do I know how to use it? Is there somebody with me that can deal with a catastrophic bleed if all of a sudden there is a genuine accident? Is the first aid kit buried somewhere in the bottom of the Land Rover or the vehicle? Or is it very easy to hand? Because you could take 3 minutes trying to find it. Dumping out half your kit. You want it there, and you want everyone to know it's there.
Yeah.
Is your life hammer there? Is your extinguisher there? Because you've only got 3 minutes.
Aha.
Okay.
So this is where the 3 minute
thing comes in. This is where the 3 minutes come in. You've got to plan. Then you think like, right, okay, so I know I can do it. It's a relatively safe route. I'm skilled, I'm confident, I'm trained to do it. Do I try and bite off more than I can chew? Do I decide, right, on this day, we're going to try and do 300 miles, when realistically, an experienced person will be saying, 100 is enough. On that road, in those conditions, and the borders you're going to get stuck with. But if you push, force yourself to drive into the night, you don't have the right lights on the vehicle, you're driving too fast. It's all about, how to avoid an accident. I don't like using the whole health and safety thing.
Yeah.
It's more kind of, it's a bit more than common sense. You've got to talk yourself through what you're going to be going through to sort of mitigate that 3 minute. That's all you've got if it all goes wrong. So, if you don't have enough food with you, you might be encouraged to think, well, I've only got water. Yes, I could sleep with the vehicle. I could sleep in the vehicle. I've got a tent. I have water, but I'm hungry. Right, well, I've got to make the next town. I don't want to be stuck out here. And so rather than just thinking, do you know what? It's 8, it's getting dark, there's wildlife, there's people using the road that either aren't skilled or they don't have any lights, or even, a cow and cart. It's so easy to run into the back of one of them. So it's making that decision to say, no, okay, well, I know that I can survive for 3 weeks without food. So why am I now pushing hard through the night to try and reach a town just so I can have dinner? Because within that time, big accident, 3 minutes, it's all over. And so you're constantly kind of doing this assessment. What are the priorities? Because if you know that ends within 3 minutes, that ends within 3 hours, that's 3 days, you can forget the rest. Yeah, I'll survive. Of course I'll survive 24 hours without eating. I'll worry about that in the morning. Might be a bit peckish, but I'll be alive and I'll be able to enjoy the next day. And that's kind of how my brain works. And you do that for each thing. Now I know there's probably a lot of talk within the overlanding community about roof tents. Never use them. I suppose the stuff I do is more, my overlanding trips are for work. And so I tend to go very light, relatively quickly. There's no kind of sightseeing as such. If I'm going to see something, it's a recce because a project or a team are going to pass through later, or a film crew want to do something. So I've never taken roof tents. There are obviously other issues, like, you know, the maximum amount of weight you can put on a roof, I think for a Defender is 75 kilograms. And by the time you've put a roof rack up there, and you've put the roof tent up there, and you've put yourself up there, you're 250 kilograms.
75 kilogram when the vehicle's moving. When it's stationary, it's probably a lot more. But
Yeah.
I mean that,
But
a roof tent and a roof rack,
Yeah.
you're pretty close to 75.
Yeah, so then it kind of makes it top heavy. The other thing is, if it's blowing an absolute hoolie, do you want to be stuck 6 feet further up in a tent that the scouts probably stopped using back in the 1950s? You know, they tend to be sort of a waxed cotton, very heavy. You know, you would never see them at Everest Base Camp. You know, that's much more super lightweight, very taut, you know, geodesic, you know, wind deflecting kind of tents. And you've got a 3-ton truck sitting there. Well, I would sooner be behind it using this massive block of metal as my shelter, because that's my second priority. You don't want to be kind of in it getting hypothermic because the wind is howling through and all the rest of it.
As well. Yes. Yeah.
So, but the other thing, the other risk with roof tents is vehicles have been known to catch on fire. You know, you can never say a vehicle has never ever caught fire. Vehicles have been known to end up upside down, or you end up sliding it into a ditch and all of a sudden it's a nice jaunty angle. Well, if your next priority, which is 3 hours, happens to be on fire, or it happens to be on the underside of your 4x4, where's your shelter? And if it happens to be at a horrible angle, or it's damaged, or it's been hit by the wind, you don't want to rely just on a roof tent. You do need another form of shelter. You need to be able to grab something and say, right, it's all gone wrong. I'm not in immediate danger. I'm not bleeding to death, so I haven't, my 3 minutes isn't a worry, but my 3 hours is my next worry. My shelter. Grab it. Do I have the right kit to survive a night outside? If someone's, you know, literally, and this is what we did in the military. I was my first job. I was a helicopter mechanic with an Arctic warfare unit, and we were part of a rapid deployment unit from the British Army as part of the whole big NATO thing. And so we would go right up to the top of Norway at -40, and it was a classic thing they did with us. They took us on a survival, part of the Arctic survival training was to go into this huge snow-filled valley right up in the top of Norway. And we had all our kit, rucksacks, we had tents, we had bivvies, we had stoves, we had everything. And they literally parked the big tracked, they were called Haglands, big over snow buggies. They parked them in the valley, and there were about 40 of us there. And they said, right, just get out, stretch your legs, you know, have a cup of tea, you know, just stretch your legs, and we've got a long way to go. And we got out, that's it, they buggered off. And left us for 24 hours, just what we were standing in. Of course, we were not equipped. You had the basic, you know, we had no water with us, because that was in our Bergens, rucksacks. We had a little sort of survival pouch of food, and a silly little survival bag they gave us that looked like basically an 8-foot square piece of cling film wrapped round a piece of cardboard. And we were convinced the cardboard had to do something because it took up about 90% of this package that they gave us. And it was useless. So basically we had to take our jackets off, dig a snow hole, try and get some broken branches and live in this hole for 24 hours. And that's the reality of when you take vehicles out into an extreme environment. What happens if something went horribly, horribly wrong and you had to get out of that vehicle quickly? We always have grab bags, you know.
Yes.
Something you can grab with your immediate, this will keep me alive for 24, 36, 48 hours, kind of whatever.
Yeah.
But most of it is the clothing. If you don't have the right clothing, a lot of people will be 100% reliant on the vehicle and on the engine and on the fuel they put in the engine and the oil they put in the engine. And so if you've got to suddenly get out quick, you know, for whatever reason, it's on fire, and you suddenly find yourself standing there. If I stood in Siberia dressed like this, I don't think I'd even make 3 hours at -60. My hands would be numb within... Well, I was there in February doing doing a recce, and I did the whole little YouTube, hold the camera, film myself. I could keep my hat because I didn't have a little remote thing. I had to press, you know, you've got to have bare skin on an iPhone skin. I had to have bare flesh to touch it. 1 minute was the maximum I could keep my hand out of the glove for. But the problem is, though, once that 1 minute was up and I put my hand back into the glove,
It's freezing.
I could barely do anything with it. You know, barely do anything with it. So if you had to zip up a jacket, no chance. Your hand is absolutely as near enough dead. It's so
Right.
numb you can't feel it. So yeah, if I was outside and I literally jumped out of our Nissan Patrols dressed like this, I'd probably be a bit of a heap on the floor within 10 minutes. I'd probably be dead within the hour.